Welcome to Ask the FM Doctor, an interactive web series brought to you by the Simplard Foundation and IFMA to help you navigate the complex and ever-changing world of facility management. Whether you're a seasoned professional or a newcomer to the field, you'll find valuable insights and tips to deliver a better experience for your stakeholders while saving money. Join us on the third Tuesday of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern U.S. time to learn from our FM docs while connecting with other facility managers from around the world. Register today at simplerfoundation.org/FM-doctor so you don't miss an upcoming session.
So let's dive straight into this here. The topic of energy technologies, especially from the insights of a facilities professional, is definitely something that's of a hot topic. And as we go through this here, we're going to have some definitions, and just so we're on the same page with this, and then we'll walk through some practical advice and actually some research we've done in this space that can help offer some perspectives that might be beneficial as we take a look at this. Okay, so when you talk about understanding really decarbonization, I know this is energy technology, but really fundamentally this comes to decarbonization, what that means. So when we talk about that, what is a process of reducing our carbon emissions through renewable energy, energy efficiency, carbon capture technologies, and other related technologies as we look at that. Really, the goal here of decarbonization is to reduce the impact of climate change and to move towards a low carbon or net zero carbon feature. So what does this mean for facilities folks? It means that a lot of the requirements for us are going to involve retrofitting our existing facilities to make them more energy efficient. That means upgrading HVAC systems, other mechanical systems, and also prioritizing upgrades like the envelope, so the skin of the building, roofing systems, and other related components. So that's when we talk about decarbonization. That's really what we're focusing on here as we dive into this. So there's also other definitions, and maybe these are some buzz phrases that you've heard about there, and I just want to, they're not really buzz phrases, but we maybe don't have a clear definition as to what those actually entail. So some key things to understand, so when you talk about net zero emissions, what that means is we achieve an overall balance of greenhouse gas emissions produced by the facility and those taken out of the atmosphere, right? When we talk about net zero energy, generally speaking, that the building produces enough renewable energy to meet its own annual energy requirements by also or subsequently reducing the use of non-renewable energy in the building sector. When we talk about net zero carbon, this refers to achieving net zero carbon dioxide emissions by balancing how much of those CO2 emissions from the removal as part of that process, or by eliminating a production altogether. And finally, carbon positive refers to moves beyond carbon zero by producing more energy on the site than the building requires and putting that energy back into the power grid so that others can benefit from what this is here, right? So when we talk about the need for decarbonization and why we actually do this, there's a couple of things that are driving this. One here is because obviously this has an impact on the environment, and so we want to be cognizant of what those impacts are. So there's an operational standpoint, and that's really what this is all about. But there's also regulatory shifts that are happening in the United States and elsewhere throughout the world to have more focus on reducing the carbon impact of our buildings as we look at that, right? So it's not just about environmental stewardship, which is certainly an important part of this here. It's also looking at economic opportunities through the development of green industries, creation of new jobs, and really the promotion of sustainable growth that actually makes this a viable financial option to have more carbon reduction as we go forward here. Now, I want to take a minute here, just go through the regulatory landscape that provides us some good context as to what's happened here. So as of a few months ago, we did kind of an overview or a lit review about what's out there. We found 24 states and Washington, D.C. as well have greenhouse gas reduction targets. So what this means here, some of these cities, for example, have recently passed legislation that says if your buildings don't perform at a certain performance level as measured by EUI or whatever measures that they're looking at, if your building doesn't perform at the level, then you as a building owner are going to be taxed or fined accordingly based on what those measures are. So for example, the city of Denver has a policy in place like this. There's a city in Massachusetts, I believe, and there's a couple other folks that have similar types of policies where, based on how the building performs, is going to have an impact. So why is that relevant for facility professionals? That I would say this has certainly been a key part on the mind of a lot of FMs, is being aware of how much energy and utility costs their buildings produce, but also now that there is additional pressure from a regulatory standpoint to actually monitor and try to reduce the impact of that. So different regulations, different rules are having consequences or penalties for non-compliance to what those standards are. So I just want to briefly show some of these targets. So these are greenhouse gas emission targets by different states. You can see here that those that are the black, those have statutory and executive targets, not just at the legislative level, but also at the government level, the governor level. Green are statutory requirements, purple is executive, and then the light blues are those that are recommended to get there, but there's nothing actually in place that mandates what that looks like. These are states with climate action plans. So some states are actively working on theirs. Others are, so the purple ones are currently released. The yellow ones are updating those plans. And the color of those different states shows you how many years that the plan has been in place for that particular state. So you can see that purple, the dark purple is recently, whereas a light purple or pink has been a number of years later. Most of them on average have been around for about 5.5 years or so. And then what we're looking at now here is state carbon pricing policies. So there's different caps, different rules that are set up with this. Many of the states have what's called cap and trade programs that limit the total amount of emission that's allowed for those particular states. And you can trade and buy credits based on what your expectations are and what your needs are as a state entity for that. Obviously, most of those facilities professionals are not involved directly in those types of decisions, but of course it affects us because our buildings are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions, and so we therefore need to be cognizant of what those looks like. And then finally here, this looks at the U.S. state electricity portfolio standards. So you can see here, again, by different colors at different states. Some states have a renewable energy portfolio, others have clean energy, and all sorts of other different approaches for how we're doing that. So this is where things are at. There's a website that are provided here. And by the way, folks, I will send you a copy of these slides at the end if you'd like to see a copy of that. But this kind of looks at the overall feel for where things are at. So if we go a little bit back further in time, we look at again, this is just focused on the United States. Obviously, there's other states, regions. So Europe has certainly taken a lot of initiatives recently in the last couple of decades, actually, to address some of these things. But this one here is just focused on the United States, looking at the carbon footprint from 1975 through 2023. You can see that according to this chart, this peaked in 2003, 2005, and since then has reduced, which is a positive direction, but there's still work to be done. Some people would argue because of that. This is U.S. emissions of greenhouse gases, 1990 through 2022. Again, you notice an overall decline over that time period. You can see that there is a dip right here. And this is, of course, due to COVID when everybody was at home, traveling less, and then that picked up right at it. But the overall trend here is trending downwards slightly as we look at that, right? Emissions increased from 2020 to 2022 by 5.7%. This was largely driven by the economic activity rebounding after everybody opened back up and people are getting back to work and different things that related to that. This shows the same chart of split up by different sectors. So you'll see that the major source of where these emissions come from is from electricity generation and by different industry folks. Others, residential is actually a very small part of the overall greenhouse gas emissions, but you can see where most of that is coming from, especially for electrical generation. So power plants is a major source of what that is. And of course, also transportation as well. So with these leveling off somewhat of these emissions in the United States and elsewhere, why, as a facilities professional, do we still need to focus on decarbonization, right? Well, the reason why for this is that one of the major causes for global warming is the emissions that were called fluorinated gases. In fact, since 1990, these have increased by almost 60%. So when we talk about fluorinated gases, what these are basically synthetic greenhouse gases, mostly used in industrial applications. So these include hydrofluorocarbons, other types of carbons, sulfur hexafluoride, and other chemicals that I don't know a whole lot about myself personally. But the reason why this is relevant here is that these are substitutes for ozone-depleting materials that have historically caused all sorts of issues here. But now these are a common substitute, but still have an impact on greenhouse gases. So not deterring the ozone, but the impact on greenhouse gases and really warming has also played impact on that. Well, from a facility standpoint, a lot of our systems, refrigeration, residential and commercial HVAC, building construction, appliance manufacturing, fire suppression, all of these different systems that we as facility professionals regularly interact with are impacted and use these fluorinated gases, which certainly can have an impact on the environment. So how do we meet these decarbonization goals? There's a couple of steps and things that we need to think about with this here. The one thing that can be done is, for the new buildings that are being designed and constructed with technologies that create a low carbon building from the get-go, from the ground up. So I think as a facilities professional, as we are involved in these discussions in designing and building new facilities, having to say of, what's the total impact on these buildings and selecting systems that are more efficient is a key part of what we can also do here, right? However, the other thing to think about that, not just new buildings, because many of us, in fact, we do studies with IFMA on a regular basis. The average building in the United States is 30 to 40 years old. So there's a huge stock of buildings that are much older that are not going to be replaced anytime soon. In fact, about 50% of the buildings that exist today will still be in use 20 to 30 years from now. So therefore, because of that, we need to really target on net zero. So three major steps that we could do to help go more towards net zero. The first thing is to strategize. What I mean by that is having a baseline expectation for what your facilities emissions are going to be, not just from a facility standpoint, but collectively as an organization to be aware of what those goals are from implementing net zero. The second thing is to digitize where possible, and these include digital solutions for actually monitoring energy usage and carbon production inside of the facilities. There's a lot of technology here that can help with some of that. I think with the advent of AI is also available as well. So by way of perhaps a short story here is that I think it was Google developed a tool called DeepMind, Google DeepMind, that was developed in 2017, I believe it was. The reason why it was kind of a big deal, they had to play chess against a program called Stockfish. And as an AI tool versus Stockfish, computer program of chess, they played each other. The AI tool beat Stockfish and is kind of a big deal. But the reason why I bring this up here is that the original reason why that AI tool was developed was, of course, not to beat chess, right? That's not the intent of it. The intent of that originally was to develop a tool that can more efficiently manage the building's heating and cooling systems and other related systems, right? So that's really why the AI tool came about, is to provide a tool to building owners that can more effectively understand where people are using the systems, how can integrate those more effectively and deliver something that is actually meaningful. So again, that's been around for a few years now, and I think as the AI develops and there's other good applications, that I think we'll see more impacts of what AI can do to actually reduce of the buildings. And then finally, is to decarbonize. Electrifying operations, is a big part of what this is. We've seen this on the transportation side with EV electric vehicles, and also electrification of other system components inside of our facilities. For many years, it's very cost prohibitive to do that, but those are changing. That's one way to think about how to actually get some of that done. Now, from a practical standpoint, there's a couple of things that can be done. Energy audits, a regular basis as you're conducting your facility condition assessments, which looks at obviously the condition of your assets and different components, is also to consider how are they producing from an energy standpoint. When you think about prioritizing and retrofitting a system or replacing that system, really focus on high impact areas like HVAC and building envelopes. A good example of this, I've done a lot of roofing work over the years, actually, a lot of roof inspections. I've been on thousands of roofs, and I'll tell you what, folks, and you all probably agree with this, but they all kind of look the same, eventually, I will say. But the thing about roofing systems that many times um, a lot of facilities folks focus on low cost, right? Pick the cheapest, install it, and we all know what happens after a couple of years. You have to fix it, replace it, and it's just very costly to do that. Well, when you think about building envelopes, that if we're selecting systems that have a long-term warranty, not just the warranty, but the warranty is meaningless, what a long-term verified field performance of that roofing system, and we're not replacing it every 5 years. I mean, think about the impact on the environment and on the carbon footprint of that system if we're not having to replace it all the time. So I think we can take a longer term perspective here, not just focus on low cost of like roofing or other systems that are looking to replace it, but long term perspective is a key part of what this is here. The third thing I'll say too is that financing, obviously, budgets are tight for many facilities organizations. There are grants out there, and I'll talk about show what some of those are, but that can help pay for and fund some of these initiatives to bring your facility to a more carbon neutral net zero standpoint. Again, building retrofits, like I talked about, a vast majority of today's buildings will still be in use 20 years from now. So because of that, retrofitting is going to be one of the key major factors to actually accomplish net zero. So digital solutions, there are different tools out there. BIM is a tool that can help model what the carbon performance of the facility is. Power meters that are connected to your network, sensors and different Internet of Things technologies can help us gather more data. And AI is really good at understanding data and helping us predict and see what's actually happening in the patterns for what's being produced. So, but it needs data, and having smart meters and other technologies can enable that to make that a little bit more efficient. So in the United States and elsewhere, there are grants out there. Again, this is just my own personal experience. That's why we're going to talk about this. Some of these examples are, for example, the United States EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has what's called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. They awarded $27 billion in greenhouse reduction grants. So honestly, if you have a facilities team and maybe you have like interns, this in fact a great thing I would do. If you hire junior personnel or even interns from my college programs, we've got a bunch of those available at our program. This is a fantastic way to help these people, these interns go out there, find something, find these grants here, and understand what those requirements are because there's money available. And as facility professionals, we should be leading the way to help fund out and get budgeting to enable some of these different things. The Department of Energy has significant grants. In fact, they awarded $90 million for resilient and efficient building energy codes. This will focus more on residential, but those are out there. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, they have green and resilient retrofit programs. So again, there's more money available for that, $180 million available. And also the American Cities Climate Challenge. Again, there's money available that can do that as well. And again, I will send copies of the slides to anybody that wants that, but essentially the main takeaway with this that if you are looking for funding to enable the adoption of some of these newer technologies, there's money available to do that. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Now, I want to shift gears here for a few minutes. And, again, we talked about net zero or near net zero buildings, versus carbon positive versus, what does the future actually look like, these mandated policies. We need a strategy to actually get there. And there's various programs that can assist with that. But at the same time, as facility professionals, we're being asked to sort through a lot of these buzzwords that are actually out there, right? So we've done some research with IFMA about this. In fact, one of the benchmarks we do is the operations and maintenance benchmark. We've done this report for North America, for Africa, for Asia, and this year we're adding in South America, and we're redoing Africa and Asia. So new benchmarks will be coming out over the next 12 months. But a big part of what this benchmark looks at is how have facility professionals changed their use of different energy technologies or energy management practices at their facilities. So one of the things we look at is we ask respondents, do you have any green certification at your buildings? And what we're seeing here is that for the percentage of those that have some green elements, in 2021, it was at 45%, but in 2017, it was at 47%. So, I mean, a 2 percentage point decrease in the last couple of years. We'll see what the new benchmark come out, what those look like. But again, there are shifts and changes as to the adoption and interest and actually using green certification as a tool to minimize that. But the thing with that here is that we're actually more interested in what are the actual practices people are doing. And on the next slide here, I think that's really quite fascinating. We looked at a variety of different energy management practices, especially on the renewable energy side of things. And we asked, how many people are using these different practices? And again, this is based on hundreds of respondents here. So look at this, compared to 2017 to 2021, 40% increase in EV charging stations, 36% increase in solar systems, alternative or renewable energy, 28%. Purchase green power for an outside source, 24%, right? So when you look at all the other energy management practices, which I don't have on the slides here, this has been by far the biggest area where people have made changes from a facility standpoint of what they're doing to take a look at that, right? So when you think about kind of what the next steps are about this, perhaps a different perspective is that we know that these initiatives about, as a facility owner, you have to maintain this level. That's coming. It's already there. The policies are out there. There's more likely to be coming in the future here. But really, the question is who has the knowledge to help us collectively as a group of FM professionals to get us to the next level? And the solution that we're proposing here is that we need to identify, train, and promote expert facility professionals. An expert, well-trained facility professional is somebody that, because of their knowledge and skills, can actually do a better job of reducing the impact of our buildings. So we always kind of say it's all about the people, which we all agree with here, but I think in today's market, and given the workforce challenges that many, many people are facing, it has never been more important about focusing on the key people and what we're doing, right? Our ability to provide sustainable green facility solutions, in my opinion, is directly related to the skills and the capabilities of the people that we hire, right? So therefore, that also brings up following questions. Well, okay, how trained how well trained are the facility professionals in energy management technologies? What are those needs? And are there any best practices or recommendations? So the last part of my discussion here today is to look at a research study we actually did to answer these questions here. It's like, what is the FM's current understanding of energy technology, and what does that look like for the future? And I will tell you, folks, it is concerning. And I'll show you why that is here. So here's what we did. We developed a short survey. It was only 19 questions, very simple. We sent it out to about 4,000 people, and it was funny because we were pursuing a research project. We got just over 500 survey responses to our survey in about 36 hours. So very, very good information. With those 530 people, we looked at their responses, and we actually did a follow-up in-depth phone interviews to look at different people that provided some really interesting responses. Our survey covered 23 different industry sectors, 8 major building use categories. We covered a total of 565 million square feet of space. Average facility size in this survey was 1.5 million square feet, 22 states throughout the US. Most of the folks that responded are in-house facilities providers. So that's who we talked to, and that's kind of the profile of what their buildings look like. Here's what they told us here. On average, almost 44% or 50% are adopting smart metering, 40% are adopting electric vehicles, photovoltaics, that's solar panels, energy dashboards, and so forth, right? So again, there's a couple categories that a lot of FMs are adopting as part of their practices, right? So like I mentioned, we actually did follow-up interviews with these people, and here's what we found out based on what they told us here. The first thing they're telling us here is that the new energy technologies often require specialized personnel. So if you have somebody, a technician that's been around for 20 or 30 years, and now we have a new system, a new technology, what a lot of folks have told us here is that that gap to get in, understand, and use these new technologies can be significant. And many times, FM, we're on the front lines responding to the documents of the building, the needs of the building occupants, right? It's too hot, it's too cold, this leaks, whatever. And because of that, it forces us to have almost different perspectives about, I have to fix this today versus I need to understand this new technology for tomorrow, because without that, we're not going to be successful. The second major thing that people told us here is that most FM organizations have extremely limited or even no training budgets. In fact, one panelist identified that a state agency, he provides services uh, that has provided services for more than $5 billion in deferred maintenance backlog, right? So why is that relevant to us here? Because we know we have all these issues. We have a huge backlog, and yet we also need training. So it's a very difficult thing, and we acknowledge that needs to be understood for what's available to actually address some of these issues. Another example here, this is almost kind of an example of why this is such a big deal. We interviewed one on-site FM. They installed an energy efficient unit and a thermostat. However, they placed that thermostat in the IT closet, and it basically caused the unit to run at nearly full capacity 24/7 for months until they realized what was happening. And actually, what happened is that the system failed, right? Because it's hot in the closet, temperature's hot, it constantly runs, and causes it to burn out, right? So again, an extreme example here, but the idea is that we need training to help these facility professionals understand the actual impact of what's happening with this. And actually, the other thing people have told us too is that in lack of understanding these programs, many of them have their YouTube training programs where they go online, they watch a video, and try to understand what's actually going on out there to address some of these needs here. So, finding technical or trades facility staff is a huge challenge. And so the question is, well, what can we do to actually find these qualified people? Well, there's a couple of things that I would recommend to think about this here. This idea is that it's hard to find people today, to find qualified people today is difficult. The reality that when you look at all the demographic data, and this is not just the United States, this is everywhere throughout the world, is that as hard as it is to find people today, this is the best it's ever going to be for the rest of our collective careers. Best it's ever going to be. Now, you look ahead, 20 to 30 years from now, when things have changed, there's fewer people, there's less demand and impact on infrastructure, it's not going to be as big of a challenge here. So our recommendation is that when we're looking at people and how to attract those people is to look at their insights and especially their interest in being educated and learning, right? It's not a magic overnight fix here that finding the key people that are willing to be educated and willing to pursue that training is a hugely important part of that as well. The other thing that we can do as facility organizations, and again, this is a bit of a plug for IFMA, but IFMA produces a number of research products and reports that help understand the latest best practices that are out there. I mean, when not just with IFMA, but broadly speaking, there's a lot of news out there, a lot of fluff, a lot of marketing. And as a reader, as a consumer of this information, you ask yourself, what's their sample size look like? How do they verify that what they're seeing is accurate? What was their actual method to go through and understand what's actually being produced here? So I know I'm talking to facilities professionals today here, but my advice to you all is to try to be better consumers or be more savvy consumers of research information because knowing and looking at the right data can be very valuable as we think about that. So when you think about sustainability and where that actually comes from is by consistently making small improvements, by hiring people that know what they're doing, not focusing on low bid, but focusing on the long-term expert perspective is the key thing that we need to do with here. So final thought with this, we did ask respondents, that kind of leads to our training discussion. We did ask everybody that we talked with here, is what percentage of you struggle with the following? So 53% of the respondents said that they have insufficient training. 90% of the respondents said they have limited skills in energy technology. Another 64%, they have a limited understanding of safety needs as they use these energy technologies, right? 50% said they have fewer training opportunities compared to other non-FM professions. And also, nearly double the number of FMs with a smaller building portfolio, in other words, less than 100,000 square feet, report significantly more training needs, right? Or I should say lack of training. So it's a big deal. The data all is clearly telling us that, and it's something we need to be focused on as we think about going forward here. So kind of key points to kind of think about this. Again, decarbonization is here. It's not going away. What is going to be determined is what's going to happen from a regulatory policy standpoint. Like I said, there's been some developments on that, but it's still not resolved as to what that future looks like. Honestly, folks, I would not be surprised in 10 or 15 years from now is that there's a federal level mandate that says something like all buildings in the United States, public and private, have to perform at this certain energy level. And if that were to happen, the impact from a retrofitting standpoint and a cost standpoint is absolutely game changing. I mean, there's going to be huge, massive impacts on facility professionals everywhere, and so it's important for us to understand that now. Net zero goals, we can do that through retrofits and energy technology. But the biggest thing here, folks, that I hope you take away from this is that training gaps are real. They need immediate attention. And the more we can do as facility leaders to provide and ensure that our people are trained and educated is probably the single greatest thing that we can do. Because having more people come to organizations, filling more seats is not something that's going to be easy to do. We have to train people, we have to educate them because we have to take our existing personnel and leverage and enhance the capabilities that they already have. All right, folks, if you do want a copy of the slides, be sure to drop me a note at jake.smithwick@charlotte.edu. I'll be glad to send you a copy of these.
Thank you for joining us for today's session of Ask BFM Doctor. Be sure to mark your calendars now and join our next webinar at 12 p.m. Central Time on the third Tuesday of the month. We look forward to seeing you again.